Welcome to this 1-hour English lesson. Are you ready to improve your advanced English vocabulary? In this lesson, you're going to learn the most common confusing words in English. So this lesson is divided into smaller lessons, and in each part, you're going to learn a group of confusing English words. You're going to learn how to use that advanced English vocabulary, and then at the end, you're going to test your knowledge. So you'll learn a group of words, and then you'll complete a quiz, and then you'll repeat that for the next hour. Are you excited? Welcome back to JForrest English Training. Of course, I'm Jennifer, and this is your place to become a fluent, confident English speaker. Let's get started. First, you're going to learn the difference between on time and in time. Let's start off with on time. Now, we use on time to refer to a specific time. And it's a specific time that something will happen. And we commonly use this with scheduled events. For example, traffic was terrible, but thankfully I got to the meeting on time. So of course you can imagine that there's a scheduled time that meeting will start. The meeting will start at, let's say, 3 o'clock. So if you get to the meeting at 3 o'clock or before, then you're on time. If you get to the meeting at 3:01 or after, then you're what? You're late, right? So that would be the opposite of on time, late. Now, you could also make a general statement and say, I'm always on time. So notice it's in the present simple because it's a routine action, which means I always get to my scheduled events on or before the time they're supposed to start, the time they're scheduled to start. I'm always on time. So what about you? Are you always on time? Let us know in the comments. And if not, what adverb would you use? I'm sometimes on time, I'm usually on time, I'm rarely on time, or I'm never on time. So let us know in the comments which one best describes you. Now let's talk about in time. In time simply means that you have sufficient time. So you can think of it as to have enough time to do something, to do what you want to do or to do what you need to do. But the real difference that you need to keep in mind is that there isn't a scheduled start time, okay? So let's imagine that I need to buy some eggs, okay? Because I'm going to make a cake. So I need to buy some eggs. Now, it will take me 15 minutes to drive to the store and then 5 minutes to get my eggs. So the amount of time I need is 20 minutes. Now, let's say that the store closes in 25 minutes. So I don't have a lot of time, right? But remember, there isn't a scheduled time that I need to get to the store. I don't have an appointment at the store to buy eggs, right? So that's the thing. There isn't a scheduled time. But I need a sufficient amount of time to buy my eggs before the store closes. So maybe I could say, oh no, I'm not going to get there in time. I'm not going to get there in time. Because remember, I need 20 minutes to complete this task, but the store closes in 25 minutes. Of course, might take me a little bit longer, right? So I might be concerned, oh no, I'm not going to get there in time. It's like saying, I don't have enough time to do what I want to do. But let's say, thankfully, there was no traffic at all and I got there in 15 minutes. Then I could say, whew, I got here in time. I got here in time. It's not on time because there isn't a scheduled event. It's in time simply because it means I have enough time, sufficient time to do what I need to do. Buy eggs before the store closes. So it's a very subtle difference, right? And I think the easiest way for you to know which one should I use is just remember on time is for a scheduled event. If you have a meeting that starts at a scheduled time, an appointment, a class, anything like that, then you would use on time. And if you're just talking about having enough time, sufficient time, then you use in time. The best way to feel confident with these is really to practice. So I want you to leave 2 examples for each. 2 examples for on time and 2 examples for in time. Put them in the comments below, and that way I can review them, and if I see any mistakes, then I can correct them and address them. So now you know the difference between on time and in time. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are the questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. How did you do with that quiz? Make sure you share your score in the comments below, and let's continue on to the next group. Now let's talk about the difference between affect and effect. Affect. Is this a noun or a verb? Put it in the comments below. Noun or verb. Did you get it? Are you sure? Do you know which one? Affect is a verb, okay? Verb, it's an action word. So brain association, affect, action. Affect, action. That can be an easy way for you to remember that. Okay, so now I'm going to make this very easy for you. Put it in the comments. Effect. Is that a noun or a verb? What do you think? Put it in the comments. Well, of course, if affect is a verb, then effect is a noun. So really, right there, boom, you know the difference. Because like I said, if you know if one's a verb and one's a noun, then based on sentence structure, only one of them can be used. But let me give you some examples so you can really see the difference. And then at the end, I'm going to show you how you can actually use affect and effect in the same sentence. And this does happen more than you would think. So let's start with affect. Like I said, affect is a verb. So for sentence structure, something affects something. That's really the structure that you need to remember. So let's see, before we go any further, if you can think of an example sentence using affect. Put it in the comments. Pause the video if you need. Put that example sentence using affect in the comments below. Did you put one in the comments? Okay, here's mine. The dry weather affected the crops. Remember our sentence structure. We have something. What's the something? Put it in the comments. What's the something? The dry weather, right? That's our something. Something affects something. The dry weather affected the crops. So the other something is, put it in the comments, it's the crop. So we have something affects something. But what do you notice about affect in this sentence? It's a verb, right? So what verb tense is this sentence in? What verb tense is this in? Put it in the comments below. The dry weather affected past simple. So we know this is a completed action in the past. And that's what you need to remember. With affect, because it's a verb, it's going to be conjugated in different structures based on the context of the sentence. Now, because affect is a verb, I can take this sentence and put it in the present simple, for example. I can put it in a different verb tense, which simply just changes the meaning. So pause the video if you need and think about what would this sentence be in the present simple. And when you have your answer, put it in the comments below. So take your time, pause the video if you need. The dry weather affected the crops. What would that be in the present simple? Do you have it? It would be the dry weather affects the crops. Did you get that S? Yeah, I made it really dramatic there. Obviously, you wouldn't say that in real situation. But just so you remember, affect is a verb. The dry weather as a subject would be what? It, right? It affects the crops. So we need to remember to conjugate our verb. And in the present simple, we add an S to he, she, it verbs, okay? The dry weather affects the crops. So it's important for you to remember that affect is what? A noun or a verb? Put it in the comments. It's a verb, and because of that, it needs to be conjugated according to the time reference and according to the subject as well. Now, let's move on to effect. Effect is what? A noun or a verb? Put it in the comments. Effect is a noun, and you can think of it as the result of something, okay? Because remember, nouns are people, places, or things. So in this case, it's like a thing. It's the result of something. It's a thing. It's a noun. Effect. And remember, because it's a noun, it could have an article, or it could be singular or plural. Those would be our choices with a noun. So let's take a look at an example. I could say the effect of the dry weather was devastating. The effect, okay? I'm starting my sentence with the noun. The effect of, notice that sentence structure, the effect of something. The something is the dry weather. The effect of the dry weather was devastating. So here, because it's a noun, I need my article in front of it. The effect. Another example, I could ask, did this policy have any negative effects? So notice here, what's different about the noun? I made it plural, right? And I'm not using an article in that case. Did the policy have any negative effects? So were there any results of the policy, and were any of those results negative? Now, just for fun, let's take a look at a sentence using both affect and effect. The side effects of this medication can negatively affect your liver. So pause the video if you need and think about this example. So the side effects. There we're using it as a noun. And that's a very common way we use this as a noun, talking about side effects or the effects of something like in our previous example. The side effects of this medication can negatively affect your liver. And of course here, something affects something. So it's really the side effects that affect your liver as the something. So this really isn't that uncommon of a situation to see affect and effect in the same sentence. So to summarize, remember, affect is what? A noun or a verb? Put it in the comments. A verb. And effect is, put it in the comments, a noun. So that should be a great trick to help you instantly know which one you need to use. Now, let's end by going back to my original email that I was writing. So remember, I wrote, Do you think this could have it? So what do you think? In this example, do I need affect or effect? Do I need a noun or a verb? Put it in the comments below. Pause the video if you need, think about it, and then put it in the comments. Do you think this could have affected it? Because I need a verb. Something affects something. And of course, this verb is conjugated according to the sentence. All right, so now you know the difference between affect and effect. This is an advanced topic, and you're going to need to practice and review this. So why don't we start now? Put in the comments below an example sentence with affect and an example sentence with effect, and bonus points, major bonus points, if you can think of an example sentence that uses both affect and effect. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are the questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. How did you do with that quiz? Make sure you share your score in the comments below, and let's continue on to the next group. I see lots of mistakes with this next one. Let's talk about the difference between borrow and lend. Now let's go back to my original question for you at the beginning. Hey, can you borrow me your car? What do you think about this sentence? Can you borrow me your car? Do you think that this sentence is correct or incorrect? Put your answers in the comments. So you can say right or wrong, thumbs up, thumbs down, yes or no, whatever you need. Put your answer in the comments. Hey, can you borrow me your car? Did you get your answer in the comments? Okay, this is what I hear quite a lot from students, even really advanced students. But I have to break it to you. That's incorrect. And to a native speaker, it's like, what? Borrow me? Huh? It does not sound good. It's because the sentence structure is incorrect, okay? So while I'm explaining the difference between borrow and lend, you really need to pay attention to that sentence structure. So let's start with borrow. Now, when you use borrow, you need to understand that you're the one receiving the item. Let's compare that to lend. When you use lend, you're the one giving the item. Now let's take a look at the sentence structure. With borrow, you borrow something. You borrow something. This is why my original sentence sounded so weird. It might not sound weird to you, but trust me, to a native speaker, that just sounds like nails on a chalkboard, because that's not the sentence structure. You do not borrow someone, okay? When I said, can you borrow me your car? Can you borrow me your car? That's incorrect sentence structure. But there's a really easy fix. All you need to do is get rid of the someone, because it's borrow something, right? So to make my original sentence correct, what would I need to do? Now remember, with borrow, you receive. So as a question, it would be, can I borrow your car? Because I'm the one receiving the car. So can I borrow your car? Can I receive your car temporarily, of course? So let me know in the comments. Can I borrow your car? So now it's your turn to practice borrow. Okay, so let me start you off with the beginning of the sentence. Can I borrow? We're going to use this as a question form. So put in the comments, can I borrow, and fill in the blank. So you need to identify the something. It could be anything. Can I borrow your cell phone charger, your pen, your earrings. Can I borrow $50? It can be anything. Put your example in the comments to make sure you practice this structure. Now let's compare the sentence structure with lend. This is why these two are confused, because with lend, you lend someone something. So with lend, we have the someone identified, okay? So perhaps I'm feeling really generous and I say to you, I can lend you my car this weekend. I can lend you my car this weekend. Because remember, with lend, you give. So I'm giving my car. That's as a positive statement. I can lend someone something. I can lend you my car this weekend. All right, so now it's time for you to practice lend. Now, with lend as an offer is going to be as a positive statement. I can lend you, and then we need the something. We can change our subject, right? It could be she can lend you, she can lend him, my boss can lend my coworker. We can play around with those subjects, okay? But make sure your sentence structure is subject, lend, someone, something. So put your example in the comments to practice. So what are you going to offer to lend me? I'm excited to find out. Now, one important note before we wrap up. Let's go back to my beginning sentence, which was incorrect. Can you borrow me your car? Can you borrow me your car? So that sentence is incorrect, but there's another way we can change this sentence to make it a question. And that question would be, can you lend me your car? Can you lend me your car? So notice, although lend means to give, notice that subject, right? Can you lend me? So although lend means to give, you're the one giving and I'm the one receiving, right? So in that case, can you lend me your car is exactly the same as, do you know what I'm about to say? It's exactly the same as, put it in the comments if you do, huge bonus points if you get this. Can you lend me your car is exactly the same as, can I borrow your car? So you may need to pause the video and think about it because you need to keep in mind the direction of who's giving, who's receiving, and you need to pay attention to that sentence structure as well. So that's a final exercise you can do before you leave. In the comments, write your own example using the two different questions, although keep in mind that they mean exactly the same thing. So try that out and see if you can get that as well. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are the questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. How did you do with that quiz? Make sure you share your score in the comments below and let's continue on to the next group. You're doing awesome. Let's continue on and review compare to and compare with. Now, first, let's talk about the verb compare, to compare. As a verb, this means to identify the similarities and or differences between two things. There are two prepositions that you can use, compare to or compare with. So let's start with compare to. As for sentence structure, you compare something to something. Remember, compare is a verb, so you need to conjugate it with your subject and time reference. When you compare something to something, it means that you're examining two things to identify their similarities. You're focusing on how A is similar to B. You're looking at A and B, and you're trying to see how are they alike. What are the similarities? That's how we use compare to. So for example, I could say, many people are comparing this election to the one in 1968. So we have the election in 2020 and the election in 1968. So you're putting them side by side, and you're doing that so you can see how are these similar? What are the commonalities? What is the likeness between these two? Now let's talk about compare with. The sentence structure is exactly the same. We're just changing the preposition. So you compare something with something. In this case, you have your two things, A and B, and you put them side by side to look at their similarities and or differences, but with a focus on the differences. So you're trying to see, how are they different? What does A have that's different from B? So that's more what you're doing when you compare something with something. So I could also say, thinking about our last example, I could say, let's compare this candidate with this candidate, okay? So we have candidate A, candidate B. I'm going to put them side by side, but this time I want to see how they're different. What is this one doing that this one isn't doing? How are they different? So that's all you need to know. Compare to, focus on similarities. Compare with, focus on differences. Now here's the thing. Native speakers generally don't follow this rule. I'll be honest, I don't follow this rule, okay? And when native speakers don't follow this rule, we just use them interchangeably. So I don't think about whether I'm comparing similarities or differences. And compare to is the more common preposition. Interestingly, in the past, like many years ago, with was the more common preposition, and they used it for both. But now in modern usage of English, I don't know why, but it's more common just to use to, and most native speakers don't use a difference between it, okay? I don't, like I said. So whether or not you actually want to follow this rule, I'll leave it up to you, but I don't. And most of the people that I know don't either. In fact, I don't really know anybody that does follow this rule. But since it was a question, I wanted you to know by definition in a textbook what the answer is. And this is a great example of how we have textbook English, which is quite rigid and very strict about usage of words and language. But then we have real English, everyday English, which is a lot more flexible. And I use everyday English. I don't use textbook English, and I always encourage my students to use everyday English as well. So ultimately, the choice is yours. But regardless, why don't you try 2 examples in the comments below. One with compare to, you can focus on similarities. One with compare with, you can focus on differences. And then why don't you just do a 3rd example where you're using them interchangeably. And I recommend using compare to because that's the more common choice. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are the questions. Hit pause. Take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. How did you do with that quiz? Make sure you share your score in the comments below, and let's continue on to the next group. This next one confuses a lot of native speakers. Let's talk about the difference between compliment with an I and compliment with an E. Now, first of all, you need to know that there's no difference in pronunciation, okay? So if you're using this in spoken English, it doesn't really matter which one you use because they sound exactly the same. But in written English, there's a difference, okay? So just keep that in mind. Now, these two words have very different meanings. Let's start with compliment. Compliment is a verb, okay? To compliment. And for sentence structure, something complements something. Now remember, it's a verb, so it needs to be conjugated according to the sentence. What does this mean? It means to add to something, or to complete something, or simply to go together nicely. Here's a really easy example for you. When I am doing my makeup, I think when I'm choosing my lipstick color, I think, what lipstick would complement my shirt, for example. Or when I'm picking out a shirt, I might think, what shirt would complement my pants? Which combination of things go nicely together? Does this lipstick add to my shirt? Does it complement it? Or does it take away from my shirt? And in that case, it doesn't complement it. So that's a very easy example. If you're a guy, probably picking out a tie. What tie would complement the shirt you're wearing? Now let's take a really fun example. Here we have a delicious piece of apple pie, my favorite pie flavor. Now think about this, okay? Thinking about our definition, to add to complete, to go nicely together. What do you think would complement this apple pie? There's no right or wrong answer. What you think would complement this pie could be very different than what I think. But do you think there are other food items or beverage items that could complement this piece of apple pie? Put your answer in the comments. What complements this apple pie? Remember, it's a verb, so you need to conjugate it accordingly when you put your example in the comments. So stop, pause the video if you need, and put it in the comments. What complements this apple pie? Well, many things could. The first thing I thought of was ice cream. Ice cream definitely complements apple pie, in my opinion. You may disagree, and that's okay. Whipped cream complements apple pie. Now, I've heard many people put a piece of cheese on apple pie, and they think that cheese really complements apple pie. That's one that's for me a little bit, I don't know, it sounds a little weird, but lots of people think that cheese complements apple pie. Now thinking about beverages, maybe a cup of coffee or tea or even hot chocolate, hot apple cider could complement this apple pie. A glass of milk could complement this apple pie. Lots of different options could complement this apple pie. So now you know what complement with an E means. So put an example sentence in the comments. Pause the video and think of an example sentence. And remember, our structure is something complements something. And it's a verb, so you need to conjugate your verb accordingly. Pause the video, put your example in the comments. Now let's talk about complement with an I. This can be both a verb, to complement, and a noun, a complement or complements. The meaning is completely different than complement with an E. They don't relate to each other at all, okay? So they're completely separate words. Complement with an I, you can think of them as kind words of praise or approval. So if you write in the comments, hey Jennifer, awesome video, you can pause right now and write that in the comments. Do it. Just do it, okay? It's part of the example. So pause the video and write, hey Jennifer, awesome video. Right there, you just complimented me. Notice, you just complimented me. Is that a noun or a verb? What do you think? Noun or verb? Put it in the comments. You just complimented me. Well, it's a verb, and you can probably identify that it's a verb because it's conjugated in the past simple. You just complimented me because you just did the action, right? It's completed. You wrote in the comments. You complimented me. I could also say you complimented my video. I could say that as well. And this simply means you offered me words of praise, words of approval, and kind words. Now, if I'm walking down the street and you see me, you say, hey, I really like that sweater. You just complimented me. You complimented my sweater. Or if I smile and you're like, Jennifer, you have such a nice smile. You just complimented me, okay? So all these small little nice words, those are compliments. Those are compliments. Right there. Did I use it as a noun or a verb? Those kind words, those are compliments. Here, it's a noun, okay? So, as a noun, it's a thing, like that word of approval, that word of praise. It's a thing. Now, of course, you can compliment somebody's smile, their hair, their earrings, their clothing, things like that. But in a workplace, hopefully you're going to offer compliments, noun. Hopefully you're going to offer compliments based on their work, based on their performance, right? So anytime your coworker or your employee does a good job, you can pay them a compliment. Pay them a compliment. You can also give them a compliment. Those are two verbs that we use interchangeably with the noun. So you can give someone a compliment, you can pay someone a compliment, okay? So let's say you're in a meeting and your coworker gives a presentation. At the end of the presentation, you can say, that was a really amazing presentation. You did an awesome job. Right there, you just gave your coworker a compliment, okay? You paid your coworker a compliment. Those two sentence structures are interchangeable and they're using the noun form. Now, you can also use the verb form. So pause the video and think, how could I take this example and change it into the verb form? What do you think? Write it in the comments below. How could I take this and change it into the verb form, to compliment? Do you have it? You just complimented your coworker. You complimented their presentation. You complimented them. So in this case, you need to remember that the meaning is very different between compliment, and also how you use them. Because compliment with an I can be used as both a verb and a noun. So I want you to get comfortable with both of these forms. So pause the video and write in the comments an example with the noun and the verb. So why don't you tell us the last time that you gave someone a compliment and the last time that you complimented someone, using the same sentence in both a noun and a verb form. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are the questions. Hit pause. Take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. How did you do with that quiz? Make sure you share your score in the comments below, and let's continue on to the next group. Lots of students make mistakes with the next pair. Let's review elder and older. Both of these are used to talk about advanced age when making a comparison. So in order to make that comparison, we need two people. One needs to be younger and one needs to be older. So let's take Don and Ed. And let's say that Don is 15 and Ed is 18. So of course, Don is younger and Ed is older. Now let's say Don and Ed are brothers. So Dawn's speaking, and Dawn could say, Ed is my older brother. My older brother. Using older to make that comparison between the ages and is to describe what type of brother he is. Now, Dawn could also say, Ed is my elder brother. Technically, Dawn can say this, but if Dawn is a native English speaker in North America, Dawn is not going to say that, because although according to a dictionary and a grammar rule, you can use elder to replace older in a comparison between two people to talk about their age, we don't do that, okay? To me, it sounds awkward, it sounds unnatural, and it's not something I hear. So my recommendation to you is to use older. Even though elder is grammatically correct, I still want you to use older because it will help you sound more natural. Now, we can also make a general statement and say Ed is older than Dawn. So notice here, I'm using older than. That's a comparative adjective. Olders are adjective, than we have our comparative adjective. Ed is older than Dawn. Now, in this case, I cannot say, grammatically, I cannot say Ed is elder than Dawn. We don't use elder than. It doesn't exist as a comparative adjective, and that's according to grammar as well. So you might be wondering, if I'm telling you don't use elder when you're talking about ages between two people, when can you use elder? Should you ever use it? Well, there is one specific case that we commonly use it in North America, and that's using elder as a noun, okay? Not an adjective, as a noun. And an elder would be one, and elders would be a group. They are senior citizens. And using the name elder sounds respectful. It sounds like a nice thing to say. It's certainly more polite than describing them as old people, right? Just describing them as elders. It's a sign of respect and it's very polite. But we use this for senior citizens. Now, honestly, my definition of a senior citizen is probably about someone who's 80 or older. 80 or older. Why? Because I think in today's modern world, people are working well into their 70s. So maybe previously you'd be considered a senior citizen at 70 or maybe even 65, but I don't see that in this modern world. When I see a 70-year-old, I see somebody who's still working, still traveling. When I think of elder, I think of like grandmas and grandpas sitting in a rocking chair like knitting, okay? So in my mind, it's someone who's about 80 or older. So we have an expression, it's just like a common saying, always respect your elders. I heard this all the time when I was growing up as a kid. Always respect your elders. And keep in mind, elders as a group, as a noun, remember, just senior citizens, people who are 80 plus. This isn't people in your direct family. So it's not just talking about my grandmother, my grandfather, or anything like that, my great uncle, great uncle. No, it's about any senior citizen. Okay, it doesn't have to be related to you. So when we say like always respect your elders, I imagine if I'm on a bus, for example, public transportation, and an elder enters the bus, gets on the bus, I would give my seat to that elder person. Why? Because that's how we respect our elders. Or same thing, if I was in a grocery store, I would let the elder person go in front of me. But remember, that is 80 plus, senior citizen. So that's an expression that we have. Always respect your elders. So let me know in the comments, is that an expression that you have in your country? I'm sure it's a universal concept. And what's something that you do to respect your elders? So for me, I always open doors. I let them go ahead of me in lines. I even offer to carry their bags if they look heavy, things like that. I always try to help out elders. What about you? What's something you do? Now, so that's how I would recommend using elders to refer to a group of senior citizens. And to summarize, when you're just talking about your brother or a family member that is more advanced in age, use older. Don't use elder. You'll sound more natural. So now you have everything you need to use these two confidently, so feel free, leave 2 comments below, one with older, one with elder. I already told you how to use elder. Give us an example of how you respect your elders. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are the questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. How did you do with that quiz? Make sure you share your score in the comments below, and let's continue on to the next group. I get questions a lot on the difference between employ, employer, employee, and employment. Let's review these now. Let's start with employ. This is a verb, to employ. As a verb, of course, you need to conjugate it with your subject and your time reference. Now, what does this mean? Well, you need to understand the sentence structure of how to use this verb, and someone or something like a company, someone employs someone. And when that someone or something like a company employs someone, that means that they pay them money in order to do a job. That's what the verb employ means. So let's look at some examples. I could say the company employs many students. Now you might think, oh, as a student, they're just doing the work for free, volunteer work, or it's an internship. No, it can't. If you use the verb employ, there has to be money exchanged for work. So it isn't volunteer. Even though that person is a student, if a company employs them, it means they're paying them to do that job. Another example, you could commonly ask, how many people does your company employ? How many people work at your company and receive money in order to do that work? Employee is a noun. You are most likely an employee. If you work for someone else, whether it's a company or an individual, and that someone pays you money to do the work, then you're an employee. You're not an employee if you own your own business and you work for yourself, for example. But if you work for someone else or a company, of course, then you're an employee. Now, as an example, you can ask the same question that we asked before using the verb employ, but this time you would ask, how many employees? How many employees does this company have? Because now we know an employee is someone who works for a company and is paid for it. How many employees does this company have? Or another example, the company gave every employee a raise. So every person at that company that receives a paycheck, they gave them all a raise. All their employees got a raise. Now let's talk about employer. I hear many students, even sometimes native speakers, confuse employee and employer. All you have to remember is employee is the one getting paid, and the employer is the one paying the employee, okay? So employer, that's like the boss, it's the company. Employee is the one working at that company and getting paid. So you can think of it as an employer is a company or a person that employs people, now that you know what the verb employ means. For example, let's say you're going to a job interview and they say to you, HR says to you, we need a reference from your last employer. Your last employer. So the last person or company that employed you. Notice how all these words are coming together. Or another example, and this could be a great example sentence that you leave in the comments below, so just think of this. I could say, the government is the largest employer in my city. And this is true because I live in the capital, and in the capital, that's where all the official government business takes place. So the government is the biggest employer in my city. The government employs the most people. So all the employees, they're employees of the government. See how it's all coming together? Now, finally, employment. Employment, you can think of this more as a concept. It's a noun, and it's the concept of paying someone for work. But as a concept, we talk about it more in terms of employment rate, employment level. So you'll see employment used in a lot of statistics. For example, they might say right now, employment levels are at an all-time low. So employment levels, that's simply the number of people employed. Now also, they talk about unemployment. Unemployment, of course, are the people that are not employed, are not working for money, right? So you might say the unemployment rate in my city is really high. So the number of people who are not employed. So now you know how to use employ, employee, employer, and employment. So definitely it's your turn to practice. Try writing 4 sentences, leave them in the comments below, and then feel free to leave a 5th bonus sentence and see how many you can use in one sentence, because they all relate together. So you might need to watch this video again. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are the questions. Hit pause. Take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. How did you do with that quiz? Make sure you share your score in the comments below, and let's continue on to the next group. You're doing so awesome. Our final pair is the difference between income and revenue. First of all, you only need to know this if you own a business or if you're interested in business topics. Because if you're an individual who works for a company, if you're an employee, you're employed by a company, all you need to be concerned about is income. Revenue does not apply to you, okay? But you might be interested to know about the revenue that your company generates. But an individual does not generate revenue. A company generates revenue. So just keep that in mind. So for an individual, let's say you work for a company and you're just concerned about the money in your pocket as an employee. What is income? Income is how much money you make from all sources. All sources, okay? So what does that mean, all sources? Well, let's say that you are a full-time employee, okay? And let's say you have a salary and you make $75,000 a year. But in addition to your full-time employment, you're also an artist. And you like to paint in your spare time. But twice a year, you go to art shows on weekends and you sell your art. You don't consider this a job because you love painting. It's just a hobby of yours, but your paintings are really wonderful and people want to buy them. So you go to these art shows and you sell your paintings twice a year. And from those art shows, you make $20,000 from your art. So your income is not just the money you get from your employer. Your income is all sources of money that you receive. So of course your employer is probably going to be the most important income source, I imagine. But if you have any sort of hobbies that you generate money from, even if you have a garage sale and you make $1,000, technically that's still your income. You sell a bike and you make $100. You would include that in your total income. So your total income is the money you make from all sources. Now, let's go back to the concept of revenue versus income. But remember, this is something that only applies to businesses. Small businesses, large businesses, it doesn't matter. Any type of business. So in a business, revenue is the money generated from all sales. So let's say a company has 5 different products, and each of those products generates some money. And then you add all of those together and that company generates $25 million that year. That's the revenue, the money generated from all sales. Now, what's income in a company? Income is the revenue, which we just learned, the revenue minus the expenses. That leaves you with the income. So let's say you generate that $25 million, but to do that, you needed to spend $10 million in advertisement. So your revenue is $25 million, but your income is your revenue minus your expenses, so your income is $15 million. Now, just in case you're wondering, that is also referred to as net profit. That's just a little bonus expression for you. So there you have it. That's the difference between revenue and income. So now it's your turn to practice. Why don't you leave 2 examples in the comments below, one using revenue and one using income. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are the questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. Amazing job with this 1-hour English lesson. Woohoo! You did it. Way to go. Make sure you share your scores in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and of course, subscribe. And before you go, make sure you head on over to my website, JForrestEnglish.com, and download your free speaking guide. In this guide, I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. And until next time, happy studying.